Let me just review what we've done here. We have a list of spaces and we can enter a space and we see a sphere. We can click to drag and we can use our cursor keys to move in and out. And if we inspect the console for ourselves, we don't see anything, but if we were to open up another browser, we would see their position and rotation of their camera output here. So let me review the pieces. So the router defines the destination pages that we can hit. So we can look at router. And here is the live view URLs for editing a page. And then this is for entering a page, the S and then ID, which is this. That is governed by the space controller. So from the router, it points a path to a controller, which is the space controller. And in the space controller, we render a template, which is this show template. And in the show template, we put down a canvas and make some variables available. And because it uses the layout, in the layout called root, here we include app.js, which is a bundle. So this app.js includes two files that we've made. One is governing the scene, which renders the Babylon.js, and one is for communications called the broker. And both of these are initialized within this DOM loaded event. So once all the DOM is finished loading, this event listener will kick off this function here, which will actually we're not even using the event here. It will check and see if you have a canvas in the document, and then it will initialize an RxJS subject for an event bus and call the constructor for making a scene and creating a broker, handing them the bus. And in the scene, we are listening for camera changes, pushing them onto the bus as values. And then in the broker side, we are subscribing to the bus and then pushing it on the channel person moved. So that's kind of what we did up until this point. And then offline, I added a couple things to identify who we are, because here it's a generic message. So this is the event name, and this is the event payload. And so channel push will go to a channel space channel, and it will be handled by this function, this person moved and payload, and then we're just broadcasting it to every other user, but you don't know who's moving. So you say person moved, but you don't have any ID. So to create an ID, you can create a full-fledged authentication and sign-in system, but for now I just want you to have some ID when you hit the page. So if we go back to router, I added into this pipeline a custom plug. And what plugs are is they get to take a connection, which is a struct of all the request information, like the headers, and you can read from that data, you can write into the data. And so the plug is a function that takes that connection object, and you'll be able to set some things on it, and you return a new connection object. So this is a pipeline of plugs. It just, all of them take a connection and modify it, return a new connection all the way down. So this maybe assign member ID. It's just a private function I wrote in here that is going to take the connection in some initialization, which you can put along as a second argument, but I'm it's not necessary. And in here, we read from that connection a session variable called member ID. And if there's nothing there, then we'll set one into the session. And if there is one there, then we'll just assign it into the connection assigns, which makes it available to other views and the templates and so on and so forth. So here we are randomly generating one. If we don't have one in the get session, then we put a session variable with that new randomized string into the connection, and then both of these cases will assign it into what's called the assigns area of that connection, which is really just a map of whatever custom variables that you want. So once this is in there, it's available in connection assigns. So if we go to the space channel, the space controller for the dead page, for the template that's going to render this thing, we are plucking out that member ID from the assigns. So when we hit the page for the first time, the session will be empty. We'll create a new random ID and then put it into the assigns. And so here we're pulling it out of the assigns, and then we are going to create a unique token for being able to authenticate the WebSocket. So here we're just creating a cryptographic signature. So we're signing it with the member ID, and then we're passing the space ID, that member token, and we might as well pass the let's pass the member ID here. Member ID is member ID. So we're passing all of this to be available in this template. And now if we look at the show template, we were making them available on the window object. So let's add that there. At member ID will be the randomized ID for who we are. So now that's available to JavaScript land. And so in app.js, when we initialize these things, we can pass in some more things now. So we can pass space ID, create broker. Let's add it to the broker then. So we have a space ID here, and let's add window member ID. So let's update this function to have a member ID. And now we can enhance our message, because whenever we want to say that we're moving, then we can push this into the message. So we can add, we'll keep other things of the message, and we can have the member ID here be member ID. Right, this is just the function. We passed in member ID, and we're just enhancing that I am the one that moved. Okay, and then here if we're receiving that payload from some other client, we're just echoing it out. Okay. Yeah, I should say something about how we connect to the channel. So in broker, what we added was when we're connecting to the socket, we are passing into the params the token, which is on window member token. This again comes from the template here, member token, which in turn came from the space controller. Here's that member token, which we did taking this signature with some secret salt. And then in the user socket, which is where we handle that connection information, this is the params of that token that we just passed in from the front end. We do the opposite effect of generating it with the salt, and now we're verifying it with the same salt. And if you get okay with the something, that something that you get back is that is that thing that you encoded, that piece of data that you signed in the first place. So we get that, and we can just return OK with a socket, and it will pass. Otherwise, if you're not verified, reply error with some reason. So now that's how we are verified. So let's see what happens now when we move around. I'm going to open up another browser. I'll just minimize this. Localhost spaces, and we'll enter into the same space. And now if we move around here, you see the member ID on this side is BADFL. And let's see, how do I pull up the, I don't know how to pull this up in Safari. Are there developer tools? View. Well, if we were able to, you would see a different set of member ID coming out on this side. Okay. So this was how we added user identities to our communications.